Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about a fake leak that way too many people are believing without actually reading into things. I'm telling you, if you have any semblance of reading comprehension and you actually take a moment to look at what's going on, you wouldn't have believed this leak, but so many people are fully buying into this leak for Mario Maker 3. And I'm here to tell you that yes, it is fake. It's not a leak, it's not even a rumor, it's complete baloney. However, does that mean there is no Mario Maker 3 in the works? Well, it still might be. And so we're going to be getting into that as well today. But before going forward, let me remind you all that I have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers. Hopefully, by the time we get that giant June Direct, supposedly that's when it's going to happen. So if you do find yourself enjoying my videos, I would very much appreciate your support. Subscribing, if you haven't already, liking and commenting would certainly help too. So there's this article going around on Twitter. My Nintendo News posted this. Leaker claims Super Mario Maker 3 is in development. It has over 541,000 views. A lot of people have seen this tweet. Enough people have seen this tweet that the evil AI overlords now believe it to be true. As you see here, if you Google, is Mario Maker 3 in development, you're going to see this AI overview response right here. Based on recent April 2026 reports, Super Mario Maker 3 is rumored to be in development for Nintendo's next generation console. Speculation suggests a potential 2026 to 2027 release, with rumors focusing on enhanced super worlds, new game styles like Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and better creation tools. However, Nintendo's not officially confirmed this. So let me just tell you, this is incorrect. And you might say, well, it's saying it's a rumor, it's not promising it. Here's the thing, that's still wrong. No one has heard about this. These April 2026 reports are not valid reports, and I'm going to explain why. That doesn't mean a Mario Maker 3 isn't in development, but there have been no legitimate leaks about a Mario Maker 3 up to this point. So here's the context you need. We were talking about earlier this week different things regarding the future of Luigi's Mansion, a Luigi's Mansion movie, Luigi's Mansion 4. There's actually a solid amount of evidence to suggest that Luigi's Mansion 4 is not that far off. But Special Nick, who we've talked about before on this channel when it comes to Nintendo rumors, has actually been extremely reliable. Up to this point, I haven't seen them be wrong about Nintendo things. They shared about the Mario Galaxy 2 remaster before it was confirmed, all the Switch 2 launch plans with the Mario Kart Royal Bundle, Metroid Prime 4 details. We've covered this a few times before. But Nick has heard about amiibos coming for Zelda and Luigi's Mansion. They are in the works now, which suggests they are not too far off. Of course, it's pretty easy to assume that we're going to be getting Zelda stuff for the 40th anniversary, especially if there is a big game coming out later this year, as reported by many. The Ocarina of Time remake, we shall see, not confirmed, simply reported by many, and we've been theorizing it for many years because there has been a lot of mounting evidence. And there has also been mounting evidence for a Luigi's Mansion 4, as we've also talked about. And Nick has heard about an amiibo, which seems to support that, but also here, he's talking about how he's heard about a pitch for a Luigi's Mansion movie. So different outlets and creators like myself started talking about this news from Nick about the Luigi's Mansion movie pitch, which we talked about earlier this week. However, you'll see this thread here, in this global box office post here. Joker said, no, we want a new game and not a movie. And Nick responds, actually, as far as I know, they are doing a new game. Pretty sure that's been heavily rumored for a while. I have a very small amount of info on it. There's also a Luigi's Mansion amiibo planned, so I'd assume that's for the new game. So Nick here confirms the connection we've been making with the amiibo and a new game, but it wasn't until April 8th that he actually said he had heard about the game. But you might be wondering, okay, we're talking about Luigi's Mansion stuff. That's where there's been a potential leak here from Nick. This is the rumor. This is what he's heard. That is the definition of a rumor, when someone hears something. A leak is information that gets out there that isn't supposed to have gone out there. So if this rumor is true, it would be a leak of Luigi's Mansion 4 and also a pitch for a Luigi's Mansion movie. And given Nick's track history of hearing about Nintendo things before confirmed, I feel pretty good about it. Doesn't mean it's for sure 100% happening, but yeah, I think there's a good chance. And yet with this information out there, we're seeing reports like this. Leaker claims Super Mario Maker 3 is in development, and you might be wondering, how in the world did that come to be? How are people taking what Nick has said to mean Mario Maker 3 is in development? Well, as you see here, they quote him, "By the way, I never gave any details beyond hearing that it's a thing. I never said anything about a year or release timing. I'm aware of the setting, but haven't said anything publicly." And so, out of context, you're assuming this is what Nick said about Mario Maker 3. He didn't. So going to the post where it happened, you see BFun here put out just basically sharing the rumor, however adds that a new game is slated for late 2027, but that part has not been suggested by Nick, as Nick clarifies in this thread here where he says, "By the way, I never gave any details beyond hearing that it's a thing. I never said anything about a year or release timing." He's clarifying he never said anything like that because this rumor is sharing his information and the 2027 thing is being added in there, which he never suggested. He does say, however, about Luigi's Mansion 4, "I'm aware of the setting, but haven't said anything publicly." So I'm very interested about that. There have been different locations in the Luigi's Mansion games. The first was the very first mansion. The second one was a series of mansions. The third one was a hotel. What are they going to do this time around? Maybe a big castle? That would be cool. But that is just speculation for now. All we know is that Nick is saying he's heard about a setting and it has not said anything about a release time. But you see, the reason why people are believing this is because, one, this article right here misrepresents the information without the right context. But also, if you only look at the above post, it says, yeah, along with a Super Mario Maker 3 as well, and Nick responds. And so I can see how if people only read this, don't actually read the thread, don't consider the context, weren't actually looking at what Nick has been saying, you might somehow confuse this to be about Mario Maker 3, even though if you start to actually connect the dots, you'll see how none of this makes any sense because none of these other details have ever been mentioned. But looking at the thread, it's about Luigi's Mansion. Still talking about Luigi's Mansion. Still talking about Luigi's Mansion. They make a joke about Mario Maker 3. And then he's talking about clarifying on the release timing for the actual post. So clearly, this is a reading comprehension issue. This is about people who do not take the time to actually read through what is going on, pay attention to context, click on the sources, see where things are coming from here. So this is a problem. Now, some of you may say, oh, well, maybe he doesn't mean Luigi's Mansion. Maybe he's also talking about Mario Maker 3 here. He's not, but if you don't believe me, how about just what he says himself? Here he is saying in response to this post, wait, what? No, I wasn't talking about Mario Maker 3. What the hell? So there you go. From the man himself, he is clarifying that this is baloney. It makes no sense. It's a reading comprehension issue that has been spread like wildfire, which to me is insane. So insane that like we're seeing an AI overview on Google that if people search this up, the AI overview has also been fooled because guess what? It's not a person. It doesn't have reading comprehension. So yeah, this is a pretty big dumb issue and it's really unfortunate. I saw a lot of people reposting this, misconstruing or misportraying what has actually been going on. I messaged a few people about it, and to their credit, they took down the post after they saw that they were misrepresenting the story. But the initial article is still out there, has not been changed, has not been updated, nothing like that at all, which I think is really unfortunate. So for those watching here, I strongly encourage you to make it clear to people who are confused about what is going on. There is no rumor. No one has said they heard about a Mario Maker 3. The rumor is about Luigi's Mansion 4 and a Luigi's Mansion pitch, which we talked about a few days ago. But that doesn't mean Nintendo isn't working on a Mario Maker 3. They may very well be. Some of you may already have seen this, but GameXplain actually put out a video from a couple days ago. They made a Mario Maker level. You can check out their download code to actually play the level in Mario Maker 2 that's based off what we saw in the Mario Galaxy movie. And so a lot of people have been led to believe that maybe this is like a tease or a hint that Nintendo is working on a new Mario Maker. I don't think it is. Personally, I think it's just a cool reference. After all, GameXplain was able to replicate the level in Mario Maker 2. So what tease would there be for a new Mario Maker here? There's nothing new about it. But I think at the very least you can argue that putting this in there brings Mario Maker back into the conversation, and that could fuel into the whole cross-promotional thing for Nintendo's different series and IP, as we talked about a lot. So I guess maybe if you really want to think about it from that perspective, arguably it's been teased, but then I would say, well, that would mean they're teasing a whole bunch of things with the Mario Galaxy movie. Regardless of whether it's a direct tease or not, I do believe they're probably going to put out a Mario Maker some kind on Switch 2. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we see 2 different Mario Maker releases on Switch 2. And you might be wondering what I'm getting at here. Well, let me explain. I think Mario Maker has kind of gone as far as it can go. Like, I'm not really. They can go further, like you consider the Mario Wonder element. But I don't know if they can go so much further with so much extra new stuff that it warrants making a Mario Maker 3 in the same style. But what I do think makes sense is perhaps adding a Mario Maker 2 Nintendo Switch 2 edition plus Mario Wonder content or something like that. That to me seems pretty conceivable. They could add the whole Wonder angle, and maybe you could argue that the whole Wonder angle could actually make it worthwhile for a whole Mario Maker 3. You could be right there. Maybe I'm a little bit off in saying that. But I do think it makes a lot of sense to have some kind of version of Mario Maker on Switch 2. I'm arguing a Switch 2 edition with some Wonder content and pointer controls, which would be very beneficial for a game like Mario Maker. Reminder, the Joy-Cons have mouse mode, so you can actually have pointer controls in that way, or you could use motion controls, that's also an option too. But obviously the Switch 2 is more suited for Mario Maker than Switch 1, so I do think it makes sense to revisit Mario Maker in some form. I'm thinking a Switch 2 edition of Mario Maker 2 and a brand new Mario Maker, but not Mario Maker 3, Mario Maker 3D, because it just makes way too much sense. It's way too convenient for Nintendo to not do this. And it's not like Nintendo hasn't played around with this idea before. There was Game Builder Garage where you were able to build levels, like actual games, actual platforming levels and such that were very Mario-esque. In a way, Game Builder Garage was kind of like a Mario Maker 3D, but just not a huge focus on just doing that. It was more so about teaching people about the foundations of game development, and you could create a lot of cool little fun stuff. I really thought that was a great little release, but I can actually see Nintendo eventually getting to making a Mario Maker 3D at some point during the Switch 2 era. I do not expect it to come out early. I expect it to come out later on into the generation, after Nintendo has put out their own proper 3D Mario. I don't think a Mario Maker 3D would all of a sudden outclass all 3D Marios, the same way Mario Maker 1 and 2 didn't outclass Mario Wonder when Mario Wonder came out. But I do think once you get to that point, you do have to start thinking about just how much more you're going to do with the mainline entries. So I imagine Nintendo will be calculated about their approach here and when they would put out a Mario Maker 3. But not a 2D focus, a 3D focus, especially if they have a Switch 2 update with one that has a 2D focus. So my main point here is that odds are they're probably going to revisit Mario Maker at some point during the Switch 2 era, perhaps twice as I suggested. But there has been no leak, there has been no rumor for a Mario Maker 3. That's a product of poor reporting and reading comprehension. So spread the word, make sure people understand, and maybe get excited about Luigi's Mansion if you believe the source. Or at least think there's a good chance. Which I do, I think there's a pretty good chance. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.